Maksa ma'am, can you try the screen presentation? Shall we check it now? Maksa ma'am?
I'm here.
Can you present the screen? If it's possible, we can check it out.
Yeah, so you want me to just share the screen and see?
Yes, PPT.
All right.
Your presentation.
All right.
Yeah, ma'am. I'm
Fine.
sharing, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
You can stop.
Clear?
Yes, ma'am. Clear, clear. You can stop presenting the screen.
All right.
Thank you.
No problem.
இது
আমি
Ma'am, shall we start?
Yes, Priya, you can start now.
Time is 11 o'clock. Okay, thank you. Fabulous morning to all. I feel exuberant to welcome you all to the international webinar on emerging trends in educational research organized by St. Ignatius College of Education, Autonomous Palankotai, Tirunelveli, in association with Sheshai Paper and Boards Limited, Tirunelveli. First and foremost, I'd like to extend my wholehearted welcome to Reverend Sister Dr. L. Vasanthi Medona, Educational Counselor, ICM District Team, Reverend Sister Gemma, Secretary of our college, Dr. M. Maria Sauroja, Principal in Charge, Dr. S. Arakyasamy, Chief Manager of Sheshai Paper and Boards Limited Unit Tirunelveli, and the resource person of the session, Dr. Maksa Mosafabian. All the delegates, principals, professors, scholars, and students from the various institutions, I feel very happy and extend a very warm welcome and thank you all for joining us today in this international webinar. Everything starts from prayers. As Mother Teresa says, it's time to thank and praise God for being with us in all our efforts. Let's all enter in the mood of serenity and invite the power and the presence of Holy Spirit in our midst as we listen to the opening prayer song.
All that I am, all that I have, I lay them down before you, oh Lord. All my regrets and all my acclaims, the joy and the pain, I'm making them yours. Lord, I offer my life to you, everything I've been through. Use it for your glory. Lord, I offer my days to you, lifting my praise to you as a pleasing sacrifice. Lord, I offer you my life. Things in the past things yet unseen, wishes and dreams that are yet to come true. All of my heart and all of my praise, my heart and my hands are lifted to you. Lord, I offer my life to you, everything I've been through. Use it for your glory. Lord, I offer my days to you, breathing my praise to you.
Thank you all. To entangle the gathering with the words of warmth words, for that I request Dr. N. Teresita Shanti, Controller of Examinations and Assistant Professor of Physical Science, a phenomenal personality of our college, to utter the words of welcome.
A very good morning to you all. At the outset, I would like to thank the Almighty God for bringing us together in this pandemic for this international webinar on emerging trends in educational research. It's a great honor and privilege to welcome our most reverend sister, Dr. L. Vasanthi Medona, the Educational Counselor, ICM. She has epitomized unfailing spirit to succeed despite all odds. She is renowned for her transforming most of the cocoons into butterflies. We are glad to have you here on this special occasion, sister. We welcome you, dear sister.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. I would like to extend my hearty welcome to our new Secretary of St. Ignatius College of Education, Reverend Sister A. Jima. She has extended her wholehearted support for this international webinar, and we have great pleasure to welcome her on this great occasion. We welcome you, dear sister. Next, I take this moment of great pleasure to welcome our principal, Dr. M. Maria Saroja, who has put forth her strenuous efforts for the development of this institution to make it to the best. I would like to welcome Dr. S. Arogyasamy in this honorable moment. She is the Chief Manager at Sheshashayi Paper and Private Limited in the Tirunelveli unit. He has shown his keen interest to have tie-up with our institution to organize this international webinar. Thank you very much, sir, for your enthusiasm, and we welcome you, sir, on this special day. It's a great honor to welcome our resource person, Masha Moshpagian from Salahuddin University, Erbil, Iraq. Now, amidst all her busy schedule, she has concerned to give her valuable time with us to enrich our minds with her expertise. We welcome you, dear ma'am. It's a great privilege for me to extend my hearty welcome to the organizing committees, to the Dean, Dr. E.C. Punita, and all the professors from our college and various other institutions, the scholars and students for this international webinar. I hope this international webinar will bring you great enrichment for your knowledge and I wish you all success for this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful words. I feel elated to invite the versatile and charismatic leader of our college, Dr. M. Maria Saroja, Principal in Charge, who always extend her remarkable support in all our endeavors. Now I request you, ma'am, to confer the keynote address.
The most respected and loving sisters, Reverend Dr. Vasanthi Medona, our educational counselor, Reverend Sister Jamal, the secretary of our college, respected Dr. S. Arakyasamy, the chief manager, Seshai Paper and Boards Limited, Unit Tirunelveli, respected resource persons of the international webinar, Dr. Masha Masfakian, Salahuddin University, Language Center, Iraq, Dr. Chitra Dey, Assistant Professor, VIT Business School for OM, HRM and Analytics, Chennai, Professor B. William Thermaraja, the Dean, the Faculty of Arts, Head of the Department of Education, Manonmaniam Sundarara University, dear Dr. Teresita Shanti, my dear Mrs. the Controller of Examination, my dear Mrs. Michael J. Priya and Mrs. Jabashila Jennifer, the organizing secretaries of the international webinar, learned professors of St. Ignatius College of Education, dear participants, and my dear research scholars. We all know that educational research is a type of systematic investigation that applies empirical methods to solving challenges in education. It is the scientific field of study that examines education and learning process and the human attributes, interaction, organization, and institution that shape educational outcomes. The main purpose of educational research is focused upon scientific investigation and provide solution to the problem in the field of education. Educational research is the part of behavioral sciences in which emphasis had been put upon understanding, explaining, predicting, and to some degree controlling human behavior. Research in education is use of methods of scientific analysis to produce information needed to make improvement in educational planning, decision-making, teaching and learning, curriculum development, understanding of children and youth, use of instructional media, school organization, and educational management. Research in education has rendered an imperative contribution in acquiring information regarding different cultures, norms, and values. The individuals have made substantial contributions through research to their knowledge and generation of awareness, understanding administrative leadership and behavior, group procedure, classroom atmosphere, interaction analysis, self-concept, levels of aspiration, deprivation and racism, educational inequality and the deprived, marginalized and socio-economically backward section of the society. The need of research activities becomes imperative, which will support education to achieve its goal and aims. Educational research, which has been increasing in amount at a very rapid pace, can be considered in this case as it is an important indicator of development level of educational system of country and forming the basis for educational reforms. Nowadays, we can see that studies in the field of education mostly employ quantitative methods, purposive or random sampling techniques, and a sample size of below 500. Data collection tools mostly consist of scales, and the data are mostly analyzed using descriptive statistics. It should be substantive to suggest that there is a need for more qualitative or mixed methods to be used, more diverse sampling techniques to represent the population studied better to be employed, the more sophisticated statistical data analysis techniques to be used. We need to remember that descriptive survey designs being high in number and the most studied samples being undergraduates and teacher candidates indicate the researchers mostly prefer relatively easy to reach samples of the stakeholder of education. Taking into consideration of all these important points, we have arranged this international webinar on emerging trends in educational research in collaboration with Seshai Paper Boats and Limited Unit Tirunelveli. This webinar will help you to enrich your knowledge on innovative methods in educational research, research tools and techniques, contemporary research in education, various types of research designs, and strategies of writing a research paper. Dear participants, your intellectual contribution is very much needed for the successful and smooth conduct of this international webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for planting the seeds of knowledge by your prodigious keynote address. Without further ado, I request Dr. N. Teresita Shanti, Controller of Examinations, to introduce the resource person of today's session on the topic Narrative Research in Education. Ma'am, Teresita, ma'am.
Hello, am I
Yes, ma'am.
audible? Am
Yes,
I
ma'am.
audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible, ma'am.
Okay. Now I'll get in. The resource person for today's inaugural session is Masha Mosbahian. Hope I spell correctly. She's from Shilaluddin University, Iraq. She has done her master's degree in general education, master's degree in teaching language, and also has completed her PhD in education in the University of Pune, India. Also done her associate degree in elementary school education from Islamic Azad University, Urmi branch, Azerbaijan, Iran. She has got a certificate of pre-university experimental science and provisional certificate of high school in the field of experimental science from Neza Adult High School, Urmi, West Azerbaijan, Iran. Her academic experience extends to about 17 years, and she has served as the senior academic responsible for internationalization, senior academic responsible for quality assurance, director of learning development unit, Chihan University, Iraq, director of quality assurance, Chihan University, visitor lecturer at the College of Law, Erbil, Iraq, and also the visitor lecturer and basic education college, Erbil, Iraq. She has also served as the academic administrator and sales coordinator at Salutel Services Private Limited, Mumbai, and also the primary school manager and teacher at Golaya Andije, Urmi, Iran. And she has experience as the keynote addresser and as the resource person in several international and various national level seminars and conferences. Her area of research falls into difficulties in learning English and English as second language. Moreover, she has keen interest in teaching of English. Apart from this, she is also proficient in her computer skills. She's got expertise in word processing and various databases. She has proficiency in Turkish, Kurdish, and also well-versed in English. She has published more than 10 papers in various national level journals and also published more than 15 papers in international conferences and seminars. We are very happy to have such an eminent personality amidst us today, and we welcome her to deliver her expertise and share her expertise.
Thank you, ma'am, for your brief introduction about the resource person of today's session. Now, I invite the resource person of this session, Dr. Maksa Mosafidian, Salahuddin University Language Center, Erbil, Iraq, to give her views on narrative research in education. I expect this webinar will be productive and the next few hours will be enjoyable and fruitful one for you all. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Am I
ma'am.
audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible, ma'am.
All right. Namaste. Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank Ignatius College of Education, Tamil Nadu, for inviting me for this fruitful international webinar. I would like to thank dear Principal Dr. Maria Saroja for giving me such an opportunity to participate in this international webinar as resource person. I would like to thank you, Dr. Vasanti, to connect me to the college and then colleagues in this great Ignatius College of Education. I would like to welcome all the participants, scholars, students, and all my colleagues in this international webinar. Thank you very much for being with us and accompanying us in this webinar. So I'm going to share my screen with you. In this, is it visible? Are you able to see?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
All
Let's
right.
make it as a slideshow, ma'am.
All right. Is it fine now?
Yes, ma'am, perfect, ma'am, perfect.
Okay, well, in this webinar, I am going to talk about narrative research. In this webinar, I'm going to talk about narrative research, which is prepared by me, Dr. Mahsa Moshfaqian, and I would like to get feedbacks on my email from our scholars, fellows, our participants and students in my email, m.mahsa@live.com. Sorry for that. Okay, in this webinar, I'm going to talk about what is narrative research, purposes of narrative research, how narrative research developed, types of narrative research, how to collect story from the individuals in narrative research, the key characteristic of a narrative research, steps of a narrative research, how to evaluate narrative research ethical issue, and then at the end, I'll give the references. First, what is narrative research? Narrative research is all about collecting and telling a story or stories in details from an individual. So when a researcher is collecting stories and telling those stories in detail from one individual. That is called narrative research, which is very, very popular in today's life. So researchers write narrative research about experience of an individual and describe a life experience of that individual and discuss the meaning of that experience with those individuals. So when a researcher gets to individual, that individual can be a colleague, that individual can be a friend, that individual can be a student, and then get their life experiences and discuss the meaning of that experiences with individual, that is narrative research. We know individuals are having very, very unique experiences. One's experience cannot be same as others because individuals have been created very, very unique. So when we are collecting those experiences from one and then writing it down and analyzing it and interpreting it, that is called narrative research. Now, the purpose of narrative research is an attempt to increase understanding of central issue related to teaching and learning through telling and retelling the participant's story. When we are trying to tell and retell the participant story, here comes the narrative research. And then we go to the next slide, which is how narrative research can be developed. Usually, narrative research is designed and focused on studying an individual's person. So it comes a person, the researcher comes and studies that person, that individual. And then researcher becomes the interpreter of that individual's story as a purpose of a community. So unlike the other research, which we take the survey, a group of study, pre-post, pre-test, post-test, I mean, in a group of 40, 60, whatsoever, 100, 200, 400, this study is on individual. And then there are types of narrative research. These types of narrative research are the autobiographies, biographies, and life-telling. Now, what is autobiographies? Autobiographies is personal accounts. In today's life, every individual has personal accounts. So you enter your personal details or your personal account, so researcher can enter and then use those personal accounts. Then second, personal documents, like individuals are having personal documents everywhere in the world. Like, for example, you say passport. So those personal documents can be used. And then ethno stories. These ethno stories also can be used for the collecting data. And then ethno psychologies. These ethno psychologies also can be used as autobiographies to collect the data for the narrative research. And then biographies. The biographies also is important, like personal narratives, documents of the life, ethnobiographies, and person-centered ethnobiography. These are also another set of documents which we can use for the narrative research. When researcher goes for his research, he or she can use one of these methods to collect his data. Another one is life writing. In life writing, narrative interview is there. When two people are sitting, one is researcher, one is the individual, are sitting, and the interviewer taking the interviewer's interview. So the interviewer is writing his hearing and then editing, and according to his understanding, interpreting the individual's experience. And then it comes to the life story and his stories. The story I'm telling you, and the story sometimes a person makes. And then autographies again, and then it comes to the popular memories. Popular memories are the memories which is quite popular. People are aware of that. And then it goes to how to collect story from individual. There are several ways to collect stories from one individual to another. So collecting the story from individual varies from one to another. It depends to the person or a researcher. Number one is have the individual tell about his or her experience through personal conversation or interview. So you sit with the person and talk about his or her experience. You talk about what he had experienced in certain condition, certain environment, or certain situation. And then have the individual record his or her story in a journal or diary. Most of people, they write their daily events, like what happened in the morning, and then how you reach to your workplace, and then what happened in your workplace. So it's as a diary, so you write it. Some people nowadays, mostly they write on their Facebook, and they publish it. Some people, they just write it on the Facebook now, mostly in social media. Some people write journals, some people write blogs, weblogs, whatsoever. So individuals are recording their stories as a journal or diary, or in social media or Facebook or whatsoever, weblog, blogs. So you can record and have them, and then put it as a narrative research. Observe the individual and record the field note. So you can observe observe your case as an individual, and then you can record what you observe as your field note. So whatever you observe, you just note it down, and then usually in these cases, when you are observing the individual and then you are recording the field, you most likely to make mistake because your observation would not be 100% accurate. But then when individual is talking about his or her story, that would be much more accurate because he or she is talking about her feelings, understanding and experience, or the interview would be much more accurate. And then again, we go to the fourth one, which is collect letters sent by an individual. When people are sending letters to each other or emails in today's life, that would be also another way, sending emails or letters one to another. Assemble a story about the individual from family members when you are trying to interview the family members. And then family members who are, I would say, close to the individual which you want to interview. That would be much more accurate. And then obtain photographs and other personal and family social artifacts. And then when you are trying to get the photographs and other personal and then family or social artifacts. In this collecting data, number 1 and number 2 are most likely to be accurate. Others are not highly recommended because when you are interviewing the person, a person is talking about her or his individual unique experience. Rest are about others' observation. So that would not be, I would say, first-hand experience. So yeah, number 1 and 2 are most accurate, according to me. Key characteristic of the narrative research. The key characteristic of a narrative research are, narrative research seeks to understand the experience of an individual. The literature review plays a minor role, unlikely to other research, which literature review plays a major role with the inquiry learning about the participants through the field. In this narrative research, literature review plays a minor role. And then after data is collected and analyzed, the researcher collaborates with the participant to check the story and may also mix his or her personal story in the final report. So what happens? We as a researcher collect the data, or someone else collects our data, and then adds her report on that, or adds his report on that. You consider a reporter goes to XYZ, goes to a criminal, interviews her, interviews the guy who committed a crime, interviews, and then he writes down his understanding and adds his or her interpretation on the report, and then give it to the press house, right? So it goes this way. And then the characteristic of the narrative research goes to individual experience. Number one is individual experience, is understanding an individual history or past experience will help explain the impact on their present and future experience. So if you understand the past experience of your case, that will help you to understand their present and future experience. The chronology of the experience, a time sequence or a chronology of an event helps readers understand and follow the researcher. And then collecting the individual stories. Stories can be acquired through the various means, as I mentioned, including interviews, informal or formal observations, conversions, journals, letters, or memory box I mentioned earlier. So you can interview, you can informally observe, you can formally observe, you can go for the journal or diary or letters exchange or email exchange or memory box or social media, and all the examples of the field text. So number 4 is restory, also known as retelling or remapping. Restory is known as retelling or remapping process of graphing story reviewing. When we are graphing the stories, where we are retelling the stories, when we are remapping the stories, for example, the time, the place, the plot, or the scene, and rewriting the story in a chronological sequence. And then other key elements also include the setting, characteristic, action, problem, resolution. They provide the reader a background information. All those sequences which we add chronologically gives a good background for a reader to understand what we are saying actually, what we are trying to convey, what we are trying to say. We are actually remapping what we have already heard from X, Y, Z, from our case. So number 5, and one of the most important characteristics of the narrative research is coding for terms. Data can be coded, very, very important, into terms or categories. About 5 of 7 terms are identified and can be incorporated into passage of the story or in a separate session. And then we go to the context or setting. The context or setting can be described in details. The place where the story physically occurs. When we are actually describing the story in details, and we are just telling where the story actually had happened, physically had happened, not when we have remapped them, not when we have retold the story, no, when physically that had happened. And then collaboration with participants. Occurring throughout the research process, the participant and the researcher work together to listen the gap between the narrative told and narrative report. Okay, when the researcher is trying to report the story of the case, when the researcher is trying to retell the story of the case, there is a gap, always. These case and researcher are trying to fill the gap. This filling the gap is collaborating with participants. These two are working to find out what is missing. Occurring throughout the research process. And then here it comes the most important thing, which should not be lied, which should not be filled in with inaccurate information, which should not counted as just filling information. It should be accurate and right and correct information. So here is the fact that when the case is telling the story to the researcher, and then there is a gap, there is a missing part, and the researcher is trying to fill in the gap, they should find out what is missing. The missing part could be the part which the case has forgotten, or he is unable to remember that part because that was a tragedy, he doesn't want to remember, or some accident had happened, so he was unconscious at the moment, or anything could be the case. But then they try to fill in the gap with right, correct, accurate information. And then we go to the steps of a narrative research. There are steps for narrative research. Okay, here it comes. There are 7 commonly used steps during a narrative research. Even though listed in a sequential order, there are only a suggestion for research to follow. Step 1, identify a problem or phenomenon to explore. When we are identifying the issue or a concern, provide a purpose for study and enable the researcher to understand the personal or social experience of an individual or individuals. So, number 1 in narrative research is to identify a problem. When we see a problem, we try to sort it. When we identify a phenomenon, we reach out the person and we just approach the person to help them. We approach the person, we try to understand the problem, and then we try to help them to sort it out. So number 1 is identify a problem or phenomenon to explore. Step number 2, select 1 or more participants to study. Now, many narrative studies examine only 1 individual, but several individuals may be studies as well. So to have accurate study, many narrative study only one individual. But sometimes some individuals, maybe studies as well, select an individual or individual who can provide an understanding of issue. So we should select people who are able to understand the issue. It's very important. If a person is unable to understand the issue, our study would be wasted. Carefully select the purpose based on the experiences. Step number 3, collect the story from that participant. Beside the participant verbally sharing their story throughout conversation and interview, field text also provides information about the participant. First, better to get the information throughout the conversation. And then we can go to the field text, which provides information of the participants. Example includes journals, diary, letters, photographs, memory box, and etc., which has been already mentioned. Number 4, restory or retelling the individual's story. The step involves examining the raw data, identifying the key element, organizing and sequencing these elements, and then retelling the story that describes the individual's experience. So after identifying, after finding the person, after understanding the phenomenon, after collecting the information, after step number 1, 2, 3. Now we are in step number 4, restory or retelling the individual story, which is after collecting the raw data, identifying the key element. What are the key elements? And organizing and sequencing those key elements. We are organizing those key elements and retelling the story to describe the individual unique experience. That restoring will help to read and understand the story by sequence in logical order. This story commonly follows the elements of setting, characters, problems, actions, and solutions. So number 1 is setting, then it goes to characters, then it goes to problems, then actions, and resolution. Number 5 is collaboration with participants and storytelling. Though the narrative story collecting process, the researcher works with the storytelling and ensure the participant experience and accurately parted. As I mentioned earlier in previous slide, when part of the story is missing due to some problem, that problem could be anything. So here, the participant and the researcher are trying to portray the accurate experience of the participant to fill in the gap which is missing. Number 6, write a story about the participant experience. Usually the biggest step in narrative research and the most important step in narrative research is the participant life experience are written into story by the researcher, highlighting specific themes that emerge throughout the story and individual. A session about the importance of narrative research can be helpful to a reader. So when reader is reading that story, that highlighting the specific theme that emerge throughout the story and helps the reader to understand it. And number 7 is validate the report accuracy. And then an accurate report is essential to preserving the story, conferring with individual and research for disconfirming evidence will protect the story's credibility. So when we are sure about our report, when we are 100% sure our report is accurate, is essential, preserving the story is important. Conferring the individual and researchers, this conferring evidence will be protected. And then we come to the next step, which is how to evaluate narrative research. Sorry. According to Creswell in 2012, a narrative research study must be consist with the criteria for quality study in narrative study. The following are guidelines according to the Creswell. A researcher might consider when evaluating the quality of a study, the researcher keeps the focus on one or two individuals. The study reports on the life experience of the individual as told through their stories. The experience are restoring and chronologically that includes the beginning, middle, and end. The study includes a significant amount of details on the context of the story, contains an analysis of story themes that emerge 5 to 7 themes. The researcher collaborates with the participant to verify, contribute, and approve of the story as it evolves into the study. Now, narrative research ethical issue. In narrative research, there are some ethical issues. Now, we see what are those ethical issues. Validity issue in narrative research design. Since narrative research develops heavily on a data collection from participant story, the validity of a story can be greatly impact on outcome. So participants may present the false story or purposefully distort the real story. This results in false data being used for narrative research. Participants may also be unable or unwilling to give the complete story due to some trauma or limitation or their memory. Mentioned earlier, researchers should be aware of these issues. So one of the most important things is the validity. So the case which we are studying on that might be unable to give information, might be unwilling to share their information, might be giving some false information due to some external forces. So the researcher should consider all these facts during the research. Researchers should be aware of these issues and then can potentially compensate by correlating the data from multiple resources. When this researcher has multiple resources, he would be able to cross-check the fact and then correlate the data and then carefully review the participants. Another one is the ownership or the copyright, which we have it also in research. Ownership, the issue of the narrative. Narrative may involve people or events that the researcher does not have permission to tell. The issue of ownership can be very, very complex and can lead to delays, or it can actually, this ownership can lead to many complicated issues. Hello? Hello?
Ma'am?
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah, narrative may also involve people or even that researcher does not have a permission to tell the story. this ownership can be very complex and complicated. Researchers should try to seek the permission to tell their story. Additionally, the researcher runs the risk of transparency, because sometimes the case or person we are studying on that is not able to disclose the fact, or is not able to disclose the name, or is not able to disclose the family name, or is not able to disclose the company name or whatsoever. So the transparency also is very, very important. Using direct quotes from the participant and careful attention to the setting and events told can help the evaluate lose of the perspective. And then it goes to participant impact. Due to the social nature of many narrative research studies, participants can be negatively impacted by participation. This can occur either directly by being identified within study, or indirectly by the influence a research report may have on their culture or lifestyle. Researchers also can create a more compassionate narrative, or at least anonymous, of the participants. The researcher must also be aware that relationship they develop between themselves and the participants should be very, very aware of the report which they are preparing for the research or for the publish, because that also, that relation which they might create impact the report. So they should also be aware, and that researchers should not be the only one to given from the study, and should give back the same way. These are the references, and that's it from me. Thank you very much. Here I am. We can have the question and answer sessions. Over to you, madam.
Dear participants, if you have any queries, you can post it in the chat box. Dear participants, if you have any queries, you can post it in the chat box, or you can I think that the explanation was clear, so that's why we didn't receive any questions.
Oh, glad to hear that.
Thank you, ma'am. So really, it was an interesting session, ma'am. So we had seen a very broad aspects in the narrative research. So the ways how we can do the narrative research in our today's life, you have given a great explanation. I think really it will be very useful for our scholars and also our professors also to go for the next level in the research. Apart from survey, qualitative and quantitative, in the qualitative, we can go for deep in study in the narrative research. Thank you so much for sharing a wonderful expertise in the field of narrative research. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Madam. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanksgiving is a time of togetherness and gratitude. Nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart. So it's time to thank those grateful hearts for the successful completion of this first session. For that, I'd like to welcome Mrs. Jabashila Jennifer, Assistant Professor of Physical Science and the coordinator of our organizing secretary of this international webinar, to propose vote of thanks. Jennifer, ma'am.
Thank you, Priya, ma'am. Thank you so much. Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone gathered here on this fantastic, brighter and sunnier day. I would like to present vote of thanks. It's a matter of pride for me that I got a chance to thank everyone present in this international webinar on emerging trends in educational research. So appreciation is a wonderful thing. It makes what is excellent in others belongs to us as well. Today I take the opportunity to put all my gratitude into words. I express my heartfelt thanks to our resource person, Dr. Maxa Mospedia, Salakri University, Language Center, Arabic Era. Ma'am, thank you so much
Thank you.
for your a clear picture, and it is a clear view about this narrative research. So you explained in a very detailed way, in an elaborative way, and all those kind of an illustration help us in the further research. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
I convey my special thanks to our respected educational counselor, Reverend Sister Dr. L. Vasti Madonna, ICM, who encouraged us in carrying out this international webinar. Thank you, dear sister. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation to our college secretary, Reverend Sister Gemma, ICM. Thank you, dear sister. I take this opportunity to thank our principal ma'am, Dr. Maria Saroja, who blessed us with her presence and took out a valuable time off her busy schedule. Thank you, ma'am, for your constant support and encouragement. I extend a very hearty word of thanks to Dr. Zara Kesani, Chief Manager, Sheshai Paper and Boards Limited, Unit Tirunelveli. Thank you so much, sir, for your association in this international webinar along with ourselves. I also wish to express my gratitude to our Dean Ma'am, Dr. E.C. Punitha, and our Controller Ma'am, Dr. Teresita Shanti, our IQAC Coordinator, Dr. Indra Mary Eril Selvi, and our Vice Principal, Dr. Jayasudha. And I would like to take this opportunity to place and record our hearty thanks to the organizing secretary, Mrs. E. Michael Jayapriya, Assistant Professor of Biological Science, for her perfect logistic support and guidance. I extend my sincere thanks to the teaching and non-teaching staff for their enormous cooperation in this international webinar on emerging trends in educational research. I must mention special thanks to all the participants, the presenters from various colleges and universities for finding out time and attending our webinar. A heartfelt thank you for all that you have done. You made our day a highest gratitude and appreciation. We are so grateful for your support. And thank you everyone for making this program successful with your contribution. Thank you all of you. Thank you so much.
Dear participants, thank you so much, Jennifer ma'am. Dear participants, your attendance link has been posted in your chat box. So we have 4 sessions. The 4 session attendance also will be collected for the preparation of your certificate. So try to fill all the 4 feedback forms, and after that only we will evaluate and we will give the participation certificate. Within a week, we will receive a participation certificate. And for the afternoon session 2 will be start exactly at 2 o'clock. So those as like a morning session, you'll be having both the Zoom and also YouTube link will be provided through the concerned WhatsApp WhatsApp group. So you can take your link from that and you can attend a meeting through YouTube and also through the Zoom also. Thank you for your cooperation for us in this morning session, and see you in the afternoon session. Thank you all. If you have any further clarification, you can ask through the WhatsApp group and we'll give a clarification also. So your link has been posted. Dear participants, your link has been posted in the chat box. You can utilize it. Dear participants, the feedback link has been posted in both the YouTube and also in the Zoom meeting also. You can utilize it. The link will be closed within 15 minutes of the end of the meeting. Try to fill the form as soon as possible. For further clarification, you can communicate with us.